The Philadelphia Phillies continue to raise the bar for creative ways to blow baseball games and maximizing the frustration of the fan base. Most recently, coming on a walk-off inside the park home run in which they attempted to stretch Jordan Romano out to a 5-out save. On top of this, Rob Thomson is failing to stick up for his players in the proper way, and we've kind of a bizarre story with Johan Rojas that I do want to throw in the mix here. But let's talk a bit about this Phillies team, and it does feel like we have hit a lull again. And we've seen some ups and downs already this season, and most recently the Phillies are 17-17 since June 1st. Now there's a lot of directions we can go with the frustrations of this. I continue to read and see all this about they just need to upgrade the bullpen, and for the people that are saying it from that angle, you must not be watching the same Phillies offense that I am, because it has been straight up lifeless. Now right at the top of the list of that, and right at the top of the list of concerns, is Bryce Harper here. Sure, he is back on the field, sure he is healthy again, but he does not look like the Bryce Harper that this Phillies team needs him to be. And while you can't nitpick anything from just a baseline of a basic baseball player, he is adequate, he is fine, but he has not been a top 5 player in baseball the way that Bryce Harper is expected to be for this Phillies team. Now, when he is at his best, he should be one of the most fearful hitters in the league, and that just has not been the case. Now, he is early back from his return from injury here. This wrist injury has been something that's been bothering him for quite some time, something dating back to last season, which is not something that I view in positive light here, but maybe we give him a little bit of time, he works things out, and he does get back on the right track. This is not time to panic about Bryce Harper completely, but certainly a storyline that I do have my eyes on. Now, really the bigger storyline here is the rest of the guys here, that obviously we can talk about Kyle Schwarber, who made some questionable decisions and then made up for it last night, attempting to steal third in one of the more head-scratching moments that I've seen with this Phillies team this year, and there's been a lot of them, but coming through with a home run to put them in a spot there. Then Rob Thomson specifically here. I think one of the recent themes that we've just circled back to, once again, 17-17 since June 1st, straight up 500 baseball team, is it's felt like this Phillies team needs a jolt. And every time it feels like they have an opportunity to take that jolt, to change things, to create some momentum, they fail to do so. The game before last night, in which Phil Cuzzy's behind the plate, some of the most atrocious umpiring that we've seen all season and in several years to this point. That is a game where if you're Rob Thomson, you 1000% need to stand up there and argue and stick up for your guys. It was Bryce Harper striking out in an at-bat that I'm not certain he even saw a strike in. It was Orion Kirkring on the hill throwing 3 consecutive strikes that were all called balls, and then directly changing the game. That player that should have struck out multiple times in that at-bat then pokes one through past in between second base and first base there. That creates first and third with no outs, and all of a sudden the game has turned on its head here. That's exactly how things have gone down in back-to-back nights, and Rob Thomson just kind of asleep at the wheel, letting things happen. I understand you're not going to change an umpire's call, and ultimately Rob Thomson, basically the excuse that he's leaning on, or what he seemed to refer to post-game, is that Phil Cuzzy specifically tends to hold it against managers. If they're getting in their grill, that you're certainly not getting those calls, and that's something that's only going to make your situation worse. But for me personally, while a manager is obviously fully responsible for making all the decisions for the baseball team, for creating the right lineups, putting the right guys on the field, getting the combinations correct there, the guys have to know that you have their back. And that was an opportunity for Rob to show that, and he straight up failed in the moment here. Now, a couple other factors that I want to dive into, as the offseason still seems to be a topic that is heavy on people's mind. And I see this tweet from John Stolnis here, which I think is interesting. He says, this offseason, every Phillies fan was confused by the team's approach to reconstructing the bullpen and signing Max Kepler as their outfield, quote, upgrade. None of it made sense. It clearly wasn't enough, and we knew it in real time. I don't understand what they were thinking. And to check back in on all these recent signings, let's take a peek here. That Max Kepler is batting .212 on the year with 10 home runs, 30 RBIs, and a .687 OPS, and by the way, has complained that he has not gotten enough opportunity to earn more or produce more for this Phillies team. Jordan Romano, a 7.44 ERA, 32.2 innings pitched, 36 strikeouts, 14 walks. Not great there, and certainly he's had his flashes. He has not been as brutal as he was at the start of the year, but we still have the moments like last night where you're trying to stretch this guy. You're trying to stretch a dude with a 7.44 ERA for a 5-out save against a pretty good baseball team in the San Francisco Giants here. That just is not going to fly at the major league level, yet that is what the Phillies continue to attempt to skate by with. Now, Jesus Luzardo is the guy who will be the least hard on out of this list here. That a 4.44 ERA, 97.1 innings pitched, 115 strikeouts, and 35 walks. This is a guy who was straight up awesome for this team for the start of the season and certainly has leaked a little oil in recent games here. I am hopeful that this is just a dude that needs the All-Star break, needs a little downtime, and we'll be back to the guy that they're counting on the second half of the season. But what I do think has become more clear with Luzardo as we have these talks about what is the playoff rotation going to look like, or who is the guy that's going to be taking the ball past the certainties there with Zack Wheeler, likely Aaron Nola. Ranger Suarez is a guy that I think has leapfrogged him. Christopher Sanchez is going to be really interesting. There's a crunch there. It's become increasingly clear to me that Luzardo is going to be a guy that isn't a bullpen option here. Now, that helps the bullpen perspective for how talented those arms can be, but obviously a different role that he will be asked to do there. That has become very clear that will be the expectation for me. Then Joe Ross has been a guy that I still basically have no idea what to make of. A 5.53 ERA, 40.2 innings pitched, 30 strikeouts, 15 walks, and I think sort of the vision that we were sold with Joe Ross when he first got to Philadelphia was that this could be a guy that could eat up multiple innings, that he could pitch 3 innings in a game that's a blowout, or he can be a guy that step up in high leverage situations, that there's a little bit untapped there. And he sort of has not been used in like any role whatsoever. And even like a game last night where he was warming up, it looked to me when watching that live that he was ready to come in and pitch the ninth. They try and stretch it with Romano giving him the 5-out save here. And obviously we know what happened with that. A walk-off inside the park home run. I'm not saying Joe Ross would have done much better, or I have a ton more confidence in that. But the fact of the matter is, as hard as I want to be on Rob Thomson from the decision-making standpoint of that's just not going to fly with Romano, what other options does he truly have? Are you arguing with me that Joe Ross would have been the secret to winning that game? And maybe it would have been better, because last night did certainly feel like one of those moments where Romano just does not have it. You can tell the games where he does, can tell the games where he doesn't, and even the first 2 outs that he recorded in those saves, both like deep fly balls that gave me a little bit of uh-oh off the bat there. So I don't know what Rob Thomson was going with there, but I understand his hands are a little tied. There's going to be some interesting conversations and discussion point in these coming weeks. I think the full push the chips in, get busy at the trade deadline moment is starting to get here, but we'll see if Dave Dombrowski sees that the same way. This is a truly special starting pitching staff that it feels such a bummer to just be wasting on a regular basis. And to quantify that exactly here, that since that Phillies starting pitchers have allowed 1 run or fewer in 14 of their past 18 starts, that is a 2.18 ERA with 119 strikeouts and just 26 walks there. Somehow, they're only 10-8 in that stretch there. That is absurd for these guys to be just dealing out quality starts and giving the team a chance to win, and for this Phillies offense to fail to capitalize here. Now, one guy who certainly has failed to capitalize at the plate on a far too regular rate is Johan Rojas here. We have this interesting story with Rojas that I did want to highlight off the field here. I do hope there is not too much made of this in the coming weeks here, but I do think this is now making news and is worth acknowledging here. That Johan Rojas is accusing his former agent of financial misconduct. And per The Athletic, it writes up, in a grievance filed with the MLBPA's last August, the Philadelphia Phillies outfielder Johan Rojas alleges that in 2019 and 2022, when Rojas was a minor league player and represented by Mendez, the agent convinced him to take out 2 advances against future big league earnings totaling $875,000. Mendez then persuaded him to invest more than $450,000 in 4Pro, Mendez's Venezuelan-based baseball academy, with promises of lucrative returns substantially more than the 25% Rojas was forfeiting in future earnings. And to add to this a little bit deeper here, this coming from On Patterson here writes, Rojas, 23, has been a part of the Phillies outfield rotation this season. He also declined to comment on the matter through his attorney, Michael Strauss. However, the grievance details troubling claims, including that Mendez misrepresented the purpose of some of the funds Rojas provided, telling him portions of it would be used to cover tax obligations. According to The Athletic, the grievance alleges that Mendez underpaid Rojas taxes in 2020 and failed to pay them at all in 2022. In a formal response to the grievance, Clutch and the attorneys urged that Rojas had voluntarily participated in the investments and attempted to extort the agency for $7.5 million. Despite this, they acknowledged that Mendez transferred $465,000 and change to Rojas in January 2024. Rojas is not the only player reportedly drawn into questionable financial arrangements with Mendez. So a lot to break down here, and a lot that I'm sure we'll get further details on in the coming weeks and days here. It does sound like Johan Rojas is a clear-cut victim here, and that he is not the only one. It is a tough spot for a guy in Johan Rojas' shoes specifically, who's obviously making the leap to come to America and play baseball and not a full grasp of like what the situation is. That the pathway is a little different for every player involved, particularly in baseball. When we talk about sports and growing to professionals, it's more unique than any other. That there's guys that are, coming from college, coming to the draft, going to the minors, and then making your way. There's guys coming from Venezuela, coming from Cuba, all these different just ways and academies that start to feed into Major League Baseball here. And if you get the wrong people in your circle, you can find yourself in quite a bit of trouble. So I'm very curious to see what the details are with this, and do hope that Johan obviously recoups all his money. And this guy, who very clearly to me, from based on reading the article in full, seems to be in the wrong here, that I do hope that he does pay the price for it, because it is a bummer for Rojas. And for a guy like Johan specifically, this is not Shohei Ohtani or Juan Soto here, where they're not going to feel a little bit of their money missing. This is a guy that's still very early in his career and is yet to earn that like big time, big ticket check yet. So kind of tough. I feel bad for the dude across the board. Do hope there is no more to come of that, and that obviously things do get straightened out. But a bit of a blip in this Philly season. We are back on that sort of timeline. Do hope things turn around and that the bats do wake up soon. I do think the playing out in San Francisco is just bad juju, just bad vibes out there. It feels like every single time they find these disastrous ways to lose, and do hope that that turns around soon. So we'll see how things go from here. The deadline is heating up. The time to get excited is getting here, and hopefully we have a couple more notable names to break down on this roster. I do think that there needs to be a jolt, and I think the trade deadline is the exact right way to find that there. So we'll see what Dave Dombrowski has up his sleeve, but appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning into this video here. If you have not already, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button to us right here on Phillies Digest. Hit a like on this video here, drop your comments below. I'll be back talking with you next time. Peace.